Hello everybody. Today I am back out, I would say along the rails or out on the trail. Not on the trail, and I guess it's kind of a stretch to say I'm not along the rails today because that rail starts there and it ends there. But it is on rails, so I guess that does count. Today we're going to talk about the history of providing power for heat and lighting and air conditioning to train cars and cabooses. May not sound like a super exciting topic, but I find it interesting, and I'm sure other people do. From the earliest days of trains and railroads in probably 1830s, 40s in its earliest format, they often used coal for heat, of course. For each car or caboose had a coal stove for heat. And for lights, they used oil lamps or lanterns, whatever you want to call it, lamps, lanterns, whatever. And that was pretty much what they used for a long while, was coal and oil to light up their train cars and to heat them. I mean, back in those days, you didn't really have much else. Then around 1881, some railroads started experimenting with battery packs, running big batteries in the train cars. I would assume each car had its own battery, and they used it for earliest forms of electric lighting, which worked, but the only problem was there was no generator or nothing to charge the batteries as they were going, so there was a short life for those batteries. The batteries lasted maybe 7-8 hours at the most, so then it took a while to charge them. And when you're running trains, look, a lot of people don't realize who aren't into trains, is engines, passenger cars, freight cars, oftentimes have very little time to sit. They are moving a lot, pretty much constantly. Very little layover time. So when you had to sit and wait batteries to charge, kind of like if you have an electric car now, gotta sit around and wait for it to charge. Problem I hope to never have to worry about. But anyway, so they had battery packs, and it worked, but it didn't work. So then a little later on down the line, in 1887, the Pennsylvania Railroad pretty much experimented, well, they didn't pretty much, they came up with basically the first example of head-end power. You ever hear of H.E.P or head-end power? That means the power is coming from the front of the train or the locomotive. I'll get a little bit more of that a little bit later. So, but the earliest version of head-end power was by the Pennsylvania Railroad. And it was basically they had a steam generator mounted in the front of a box car or a car in the front of the train, and it had a dynamo. And the dynamo would produce electricity to power lights for the train at that point and heat. Pretty much up until, I think it was up to the late 60s or 70s. It was a long time. Even after the steam era, trains still used steam heat. They had steam generators for heat. And then later on they went to electric heat. But even after the days the steam engines were gone, they were still using steam heat to power your heat for trains. Like I said, during the steam engine eras, they would pipe steam from the steam engine for steam heat, almost like baseboard heat in a house, and that was what they would use. Then once diesels came around, passenger diesels would have steam generators to produce heat for the steam to heat the cars. So, got a little sidetracked there. So then the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1887 had a steam generator which spun a dynamo. A dynamo is basically a generator that is driven by steam. Steam blows through the dynamo, and there's a generator inside. It spins and creates electricity. Steam engines to this day still use them to power the lights and electricity needed for the steam engines, because you'll see them on the top of the boiler of the steam engine. Very little do they still run them to power any other parts of the train, because just about every steam engine out running today is for tourist trains, and there's other ways to get power. These are gas generators on most tourist trains to power all your needs in the train. So I guess that worked fairly well, but still required maintenance and work and time to keep up on the steam boilers and to keep it all running. So then, sometime around the turn of the century, early 1900s, they started mounting generators on the axles of the train cars and cabooses. And what we're looking at now is an example of it. This is a truck on a caboose, and it did them on coaches too. So this is a regular truck on a caboose, had a pulley on the end, and it would go up to this pulley, and right there, which it is gone, I somehow thought it was still there, but it's gone, and it looks like it's been gone for some time. There is a generator, and if you look up somewhere, there you go, you look up there, that's where the wire went, and right here underneath this row of seats inside this caboose were battery packs. So as the train's running, it ran that pulley, which spun the generator. There would have been another belt. Hold on, the belt, God, boy, there we go. The belt would have come off of this pulley, and the generator would have sat right in here with another pulley. And that would have spun the generator, and there's the power line right there. That would have ran up into battery packs, and then all the lights and electricity needs in this caboose were used off of that, off the battery packs. And that was common. They usually ran a 32 volt system. Nowadays, later on, they went to, I think, 110, just like your house has. It went to 110 volts, but the early days was 32 volts. So that would be how they powered it. The early days, like I said, were like this. A lot of them were a little different. The pulleys were not on the outside of the axle in a lot of cases. Some were, some weren't. This is a little bit unique of a setup. Then by the 1930s, because they were needing more power, more electricity, they updated the generators with a shaft. It was a vertical shaft that drove along the side, inside, and powered the thing. It's called a spicer. I think it was called a spicer generator or a spicer drive, which produced more electricity. And I think that's when they started going to 110 volts, because they needed more electricity. Because by the 1930s, along with powering lights, by the 1930s they were starting to run air conditioning on train cars, luckily. So they also needed the larger generators. Like I said, it was a vertical shaft that went vertically through here that spun off the trucks, and it spun the generator. It's called a spicer. I think that's how you pronounce it. And that produced more power than a standard one, because you can see this generator that sat here wasn't all that big. It was big, but not large. The later ones were much larger, and like I said, those would run 110 volts, and that was because of needing air conditioning. So pretty much from 1930s up for a while, you were still running steam generated heat for passenger cars, and you're still running generators driven off of trucks, which powered your heat and your lights, or it powered your lights and your air conditioning from the 30s on. Then around the 1970s, they started experimenting with a new form of head-end power, or H.E.P, which basically meant that they were running either off the generators off the locomotive itself, or there were separate generators on the locomotive that produced power. And by this point, they had electric heat. So at this point, they got sometime in the 70s, early 80s, they got away from steam heat and they went to electric heat. And like I said, at that point, by the 70s, they were starting to run what's called head-end power, which was either powered off the generator of the locomotive, or there was a generator in the locomotive that powered it. And pretty much to this day, we still have in passenger cars, you have electric heat, and our lights are electric, of course, and they are powered off the head-end power. Now, this here is a battery box. I'm trying to think, because this is the Union Pacific. This may have been added at a later date. I don't know my Union Pacific as well as like my East Coast stuff, like Reading and other style cabooses and train cars. But these are battery boxes. Oftentimes they have generators in them later on. So the batteries from the generator may have been in there, but like I said, a lot of times the batteries were actually inside the coach or the caboose. And since there is a wire that goes up from there, the batteries may have been in here. But I'm not 100% sure. So I'm just gonna tell you, I'm not 100% sure. So anyway, I hope this filled in a little void of where you weren't sure of certain things. Sometimes we can get into braking and all the modernization of air brakes and the how it started off with guys running on the roof cranking down handbrakes, and how the invention of glad hands and modern couplers and all that good stuff. You could get all into that, and how Westinghouse saved a lot of lives and hands and fingers with their inventions. But that's again another story for another time. So no, I figured I would get a little video in about this, and a little extra credit here. If anybody knows what this is, technically it's a chock. It's a form of a wheel chock, but there's a technical term for it. See how it goes underneath the wheel in here? Anybody knows what this is called, put it in the comments below. Yes, it's technically a wheel chock, but there's a different name to it. So if you know what it is, leave it in the comments. We could also talk about roller bearings and friction bearings, except most railroaders' heads spin around or split in half when you call them friction bearings. It's plain bearings. These are roller bearings, though. Before roller bearings, they were friction bearings or plain bearings, but a lot of railroad snobs don't want to don't call it friction. It's plain bearings. Oh, okay. Well, thanks for checking it out. And here's the undercarriage of a Union Pacific caboose. Just think, the big boy could have pulled this at one time. Oh my, the big boy. All right, see you later.